Christmas, a time for joy, family, and togetherness. But what happens when that warmth turns into something unthinkable?
He's shooting. What's your address? Ma'am, I understand. I need to know your address.
On Christmas Eve in 2008, a quiet celebration in Covina, California, turned into a nightmare. A man, someone no one would have expected, walked into a family gathering with a plan so horrifying that it left an entire community shaken. That night, the holiday wasn't about love or joy. It became the scene of a massacre that would forever darken the meaning of the season. This isn't just a story of tragedy. It's a chilling reminder that darkness can hide behind even the brightest smiles. What drove someone to do this? What happened to the victims, and how did this peaceful evening spiral into chaos?
Extremely unusual and very shocking. It's just not something we see here at any time of the year, especially during Christmas.
This is the story of the Covina Christmas Massacre, a night of horror that still haunts everyone who hears about it. If you're ready to uncover the dark side of the holidays and explore a case that still haunts the nation, make sure you stay with us until the end. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our true crime episodes. Alright then, let's see what happened that fateful night, the reasons behind it, and the devastating impact it left behind. The Ortegas, an American dream family. As we piece together this harrowing story, we arrive at the quiet suburb of Covina, California. It's Christmas Eve, 2008, and the Ortega family is doing what they do best, bringing everyone together for their annual holiday celebration. Covina, a small community about 20 miles east of downtown Los Angeles, is the epitome of suburban charm. With around 50,000 residents, it's the kind of place where families thrive, and traditions like the Ortega's Christmas Eve gathering are cherished. That year, the celebration was hosted, as always, at the home of Jose and Alice Ortega, a family that many would call the picture of the American dream. Jose, or Papa Joe as his family fondly called him, was the first generation of his family born in the US after his parents immigrated. He built a life filled with hard work and success, running his own business until his well-deserved retirement in 2008. By then, their children had taken over the family business, expanding it and keeping the dream alive. Meanwhile, Jose and Alice enjoyed a peaceful retirement, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and the love they had cultivated over the years. That Christmas Eve, their home was filled with the sounds of laughter, joy, and family tradition. Around 25 loved ones packed the Ortega house that night, creating a festive scene. In one corner of the living room, the adults gathered for their traditional poker game. Others were chatting, sipping hot cocoa, and enjoying the warmth of the season. The kids, as you'd expect, were scattered everywhere, some playing in the backyard, others running through the house. As the night stretched closer to 11:30 p.m., families began to wind down, parents nudging their children toward their coats and shoes, ready to head home. But just as the first families started gathering their things, 8-year-old Katrina, one of the grandchildren, noticed something unusual outside the living room window. At first, it seemed like nothing, just someone walking toward the house. But as the figure came into view, Katrina's eyes widened with excitement. She saw the red coat, the white beard. It was Santa Claus, or so she thought. Her heart racing with joy, Katrina bolted to the front door, her small voice ringing out, "Santa's here!" She flung the door open, revealing a man dressed as everyone's favorite holiday figure. He even had a giant, gift-wrapped box in tow, dragging it behind him like a sack of toys. For Katrina, it was a moment of pure Christmas magic, a storybook scene unfolding right before her eyes. Santa and the Night of Horror. But as the front door swung open, it became clear that this wasn't the Santa Katrina had been expecting. He wasn't carrying gifts, nor was he surrounded by reindeer or holiday cheer. Instead, he held a 9mm handgun, and the moment the door opened, he began firing. The first target was the little girl who had eagerly opened the door, Katrina. In an instant, the joyful excitement of Christmas Eve turned into chaos. Bullets tore through the air, and screams filled the once cheerful home.
My daughter's been shot. She was shot in the face on the side and she's bleeding.
I know, I let the officers know. The officers are making sure it's safe for the paramedics to
I
come
need a
in.
bandage, please.
Thankfully, Katrina's injuries were not fatal, and she would later survive the ordeal. But for much of the Ortega family, fate was not as kind. Santa stepped inside and unleashed horror on the gathered family. Most of the adults were in the living room, huddled around the poker table, laughing and enjoying their tradition. From the doorway, Santa had a clear view of them, and he opened fire mercilessly. Someone managed to shout for everyone to get down, but it was already too late for many. Still, a few family members, mostly children, managed to escape. They had been playing outside by the pool, and hearing the gunshots, ran for their lives. Others, caught inside, weren't as fortunate. As Santa moved through the house, he made sure to leave no one behind. He moved upstairs, systematically searching for anyone who might still be alive. Once he was certain that no one else remained, he turned to the present he had brought with him. Inside the large, gift-wrapped box was a homemade flamethrower, a crude but devastating device built from a fuel tank, racing fuel, and a makeshift nozzle. He unwrapped the device, ignited it, and began setting the house on fire. The flames spread quickly, engulfing the home in a massive blaze. By now, the neighborhood was in an uproar. Gunshots had echoed through the quiet streets, and the glow of flames lit up the night sky. Calls to 911 poured in from neighbors, who reported seeing a man dressed as Santa entering the Ortega home, shooting indiscriminately, and setting the house on fire. One of the survivors, Leticia Ortega, managed to escape by jumping over the backyard fence. She ran to a neighbor's house to call for help. But by the time firefighters arrived, the fire had already consumed the house. The flames weren't ordinary. They reached towering heights. It took 80 firefighters several hours to bring the inferno under control. By then, the house was reduced to ashes, and everyone who hadn't managed to escape was dead. The investigation. As the smoke settled over the Ortega home, police began their investigation, questioning neighbors for any clues. One neighbor recalled something odd, a blue Dodge speeding away from the scene just minutes before authorities arrived. The strange part? The car's headlights were off, a clear sign that whoever was driving didn't want to be seen. With the shooter still unaccounted for, police were deeply concerned. Could this person, this Santa, be planning more attacks that night? The chaos and carnage left everyone on edge, wondering if Christmas Eve might bring even more devastation. But the events at the Ortega home weren't the only tragedy that night. Roughly 40 miles away, in a small home, another crime scene was unfolding. Police were called to a house where they found the body of a man named Bruce Jeffrey Pardo. He was slumped over with a 9mm bullet wound to his head, a handgun resting in his lap, and another weapon on the floor. The scene raised immediate questions. Was Bruce another victim of the Santa killer, or was something more sinister at play? The bullet wounds found on Bruce matched the 9mm bullets used in the Ortega massacre. The method of execution, close-range shots to vital areas, was chillingly similar. And while Bruce's house wasn't burned to the ground like the Ortega's home, the timing and details suggested the cases were linked. Investigators now faced a grim scenario. It was Christmas Day, and they had 10 bodies, 9 from the Ortega family and Bruce's, and no clear answers. The killer, dressed as Santa Claus, had vanished, leaving behind a trail of destruction. Panic spread throughout the community. Was there still an active shooter on the loose? Was anyone safe? Police turned to the personal histories of those involved, starting with Bruce. What they discovered painted a picture of a man whose life was unraveling. Bruce's personal life was riddled with turmoil, starting with a string of failed relationships. In 2001, Bruce was in a complicated relationship with a woman named Elena, with whom he had a son, Matthew. Tragically, when Matthew was just a toddler, he slipped into the backyard pool while under Bruce's care. The accident left Matthew severely brain damaged and permanently paralyzed. While initially attentive, Bruce began distancing himself from his son and Elena. Eventually, he stopped visiting Matthew altogether, cutting ties completely. When Elena sued him for financial support to cover the mounting medical bills, Bruce's resentment grew. Although she won the case, forcing Bruce to contribute through his insurance, he severed all remaining contact with his son and former partner. 2 years later, Bruce met Silvia Ortiz. They fell in love quickly, marrying in 2006, and Bruce seemed to embrace his new role as a stepfather to Sylvia's 3 children. For a while, they lived the picture-perfect life, filled with family outings and adventures. But then, Sylvia discovered that Bruce had been hiding his past, including his disabled son. Adding to the betrayal, Bruce had been fraudulently claiming Matthew as a dependent on his taxes to receive financial benefits, despite having abandoned him. The deception deeply strained their relationship. Sylvia found herself questioning who Bruce really was. By 2008, she'd had enough. She filed for divorce, airing all their dirty laundry during court proceedings, his obsession with money, his failed relationships, and his secretive nature. To the outside world, Bruce appeared to be a friendly, easygoing man, but Sylvia's testimony painted a much darker picture. The divorce was a breaking point for Bruce. Already burdened by financial stress and a knee injury that forced him to work from home, he spiraled into a deep depression. Friends noted a drastic change in his behavior, withdrawn, joyless, and consumed by his financial woes. When the court ordered Bruce to pay $1,700 a month in spousal support, it was the final straw. He felt humiliated, resentful, and utterly defeated. At this point, the police knew Bruce's connection to the Ortega family and Sylvia. The Ortegas weren't just victims of a random act of violence, they were targeted. Unmasking the killer. So, what exactly tied Bruce Pardo to the Ortega family? The answer lay in his bitter, unraveling divorce from Sylvia. The couple's marriage had officially ended on December 18th, just a week before the massacre. As part of the settlement, Bruce was ordered to pay Sylvia $10,000 out of pocket, and to add insult to injury, at least in Bruce's eyes, she got to keep her engagement ring. For a man already drowning in financial stress and personal grievances, this was the final blow. In the weeks leading up to Christmas, Bruce's behavior became increasingly erratic. On November 13th, he returned to a local gun store and purchased yet another handgun, bringing his arsenal to 5. Piece by piece, his plan was coming together. But what exactly was his endgame? And did he think he could get away with it? After the massacre, police were desperate for answers. They needed an eyewitness to confirm their suspicions, but this proved challenging. The few survivors were mostly children who had escaped through the backyard before they ever saw the attacker. The only adult who could potentially identify him was Letitia, the mother of Katrina, the brave little girl who had opened the door. But Letitia was in the hospital with her daughter, and police had to wait to question her. In the meantime, investigators turned their focus back to where Bruce's body had been found, his brother's house. It was Bruce's brother who discovered him and called 911. Bruce had died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound, and near his body were 2 handguns, both registered to him. A third gun was strapped to his leg. The idea of multiple shooters was quickly ruled out. All the evidence pointed to Bruce as the sole perpetrator. Not far from his brother's house, a neighbor reported a suspicious vehicle parked on the street, a car that didn't belong to anyone in the area. When police ran the plates, they discovered it was a rental car. And who had rented it? Bruce Pardo. Inside the car, they found the damning piece of evidence, a Santa suit. But here's where things got even stranger. As officers lifted the suit, it spontaneously burst into flames. The car had been rigged to explode, presumably as a failsafe to destroy evidence if anyone came looking. Photos from the scene later confirmed the car's fiery demise, a testament to how much thought Bruce had put into covering his tracks. But that wasn't all. Police also uncovered a plane ticket Bruce had purchased to Iowa, where a friend of his named Steve lived. It appeared Bruce had intended to use the ticket as a diversion, making it look like he had fled to Iowa. However, his real plan seemed to involve a second rental car found nearby. Inside this vehicle, police discovered food, guns, ammunition, and maps of the US-Mexico border. All signs pointed to an escape plan. Bruce was going to Mexico. A plan gone wrong. So, why didn't he go through with it? Why was his body found at his brother's house instead of on the run? Theories began to emerge as investigators pieced together the timeline. Letitia, once stable enough to speak with police, confirmed that Bruce had been the man in the Santa suit. She detailed how he entered the Ortega home with guns blazing, aiming directly at Sylvia and anyone else in his way. After believing he had killed everyone, Bruce unleashed his homemade flamethrower, spreading flames fueled by racing fuel, a substance far more volatile than regular gasoline. Here's where things went wrong for Bruce. Investigators suspect there was an open flame in the Ortega home, perhaps a lit candle or something cooking in the kitchen. When the highly flammable racing fuel came into contact with the flame, the house erupted in a massive fireball, catching Bruce in the explosion. The Santa suit, which had been soaked in fuel, ignited, leaving Bruce with severe burns over much of his body. When Bruce fled the scene, he was likely in excruciating pain. Medical examiners later confirmed that his burns were extensive, beyond anything survivable without immediate treatment. The agony may have been unbearable, driving Bruce to end his life with a single gunshot to the head. The angle of the wound and other evidence confirmed it was self-inflicted. The tragedy was nearly incomprehensible. In his quest for revenge against Sylvia, Bruce had destroyed an entire family, and in the end, himself. What could drive a man to commit such atrocities? The answer lay in Bruce's unraveling life, his bitterness, and his inability to cope with failure. It was a crime born from hatred, meticulously planned, yet ultimately chaotic. Alright, so what stood out to you the most about this case? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you're interested in exploring more cases like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all our true crime episodes. Thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video. Stay safe, take care of one another, and we'll see you in the next video.